Okay, we're on. Nobody's here yet. Can you let me know in the chat if I've got audio? I think you're the first one there, A.V. LaForge. Baba, okay. Can people let me know if there's audio? Type into the chat. Okay, good. Yeah, people can hear me. All right, I don't know what happened this time. Vagaries. I suspect a part of the problem. Okay, I can see the video is getting glitchy. Okay, we got pretty much everybody's back this time, so we'll start again. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So we're continuing with Girimananda Sutta, which is the Buddha discoursing on 10 perceptions to be cultivated. And last week we did Viraga, and this week we're doing Nirodha. And you may recall, if you were here last week, that these two factors often appear in a sequence leading to realization. After knowledge and vision of things as they are, there then comes nibbida, disenchantment, and then nirodha, cessation, and then vimutti, liberation. Nirodha comes after viraga, when the dispassion occurs in a being. That means that the energy or the motive power for samsaric becoming is extinguished, or is winding down. At least it's no longer driving the engine of becoming, and this causes the samsaric process to cease, the cessation. So the question, obviously, first question that arises in the mind is, what is it that ceases? And some people, even in the Buddhist time and down to the present, have interpreted Buddhism as being an annihilationist teaching. And the Buddha was accused of this by suffering. So it's not cessation is not to be seen in that negative light. It means an ending of the process. Samsara is best understood as a process. It's a activity, you could almost say. It's something we engage in moment by moment, driven by the factor of viraga, or passion. We seek to take objects. This is the original addiction, the addiction that begins in beginningless time, and that we have been engaged in forever through multiple lifetimes. The mind, the consciousness, seeks to take an object, and taking an object, it feels dissatisfied. This is dukkha, because the object's the mind. The desire And in each moment, this is happening as long as desire, tanha or raga, is present. But with the winding down of viraga, once you've seen through the illusions and seen through the nonsense, the desire diminishes and peters out. And nirodha is when this whole process stops, comes to an end. Which is really what nibbana is. The word nibbana literally means extinguishment. As the thumbnail for this talk, I showed a candle that's been extinguished. You can see it's the smoke coming from it. The mundane use, the word nibbana is the past participle of the verb nibbeti, to extinguish. So if you were using those words in a mundane, non-technical sense, someone might say, "Did you put the candle out?" And you would say, "Yes, sir, it is nibbana." And what is ceased is process of the mind and further dukkha. And in this particular sutta, remember the context of this sutta. We're talking about cultivating perceptions. The aggregata sanya is not just a automatic response or a given. It's something that we can train. We can learn to perceive things in new ways, to correct the untrue perceptions, or to widen narrow perceptions. And this particular perception, the perception of nirodha, can be cultivated by the meditator or by anybody. And when you experience that moment of freedom that comes with letting go, with ceasing. This is something I've heard in talks by Luangpo Sumedho, that there's a small bodhi, a small moment of when it's something that you may have experienced in meditation. Well, everybody who tries to meditate will experience that sometimes the mind goes off on a tangent, that you find yourself thinking about this or that, reminiscing or daydreaming. And at some point you bring yourself up short, say, "Oh, where have I gone with this? I'm supposed to be paying attention to the object." And that moment, and sometimes people will, they'll be upset with themselves for having wandered, but instead you should notice that moment of coming back to the object, the moment of stopping that train of thought. That's a little nirodha. That's a cessation. You're seeing this samsaric tangle. It suddenly comes to an end. It ceases, and it's like a breath of fresh air, an opening. It's like freedom. You've let go of this compulsive tangle in the mind, and there's a moment of clarity. And if you notice that, whenever that happens, like the sun breaking through the clouds, oh, okay, and you'll have a moment of clarity and lucidity, because you've dropped the entanglements, you've dropped the proliferation, the papancha, and that's important to perceive that you perceive those moments, the ending. In general, the ending of things. We tend to pay more attention naturally to the beginning of things. the arising, everything that occurs, whether it's a mental event or a physical external event or something in the body, everything has a beginning and a middle and an end. And we tend to pay attention mostly to the beginning. We see something arising, and we may not even notice the ending except retroactively, or where did that go? But if you try to perceive and notice the ending of things, that's actually an important insight. If you can catch the end of things, that's a moment of Nirodha. Okay, so I think I'll stop with the formal comments and go to the questions. I see there's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat already. Roll back and see that the video is frozen. Okay. Try and increase the size. Okay. In one sutta, it is said that the cause of rebirth in Brahma world is giving with the thought. There is ornament for the mind, is support for the mind. How is that different from selfish mood if I enjoy this after death, which leads to the heaven of four great kings? Well, it's similar in a way, but the critical factor for rebirth in the Brahma realm is experiencing jhana while in the human realm, which makes sense because the Brahma God's consciousness is the equivalent. It's not identical, but it's the equivalent to consciousness of a human being in jhana. A lot of the process of rebirth can be understood in that way. Like if you live like an animal, you're going to tend to be reborn in the animal realm. If you never go beyond the animal instincts, if you practice morality and Deva-like consciousness, you'll be reborn in the Deva realm. So likewise, if you develop deep samadhi, you're making your mind Brahma God-like, and you tend to be reborn in the Brahma world. Okay, Suraj asks, I have studied the Sutta Pitaka, and after 6 years of studying the suttas, I decided to become a forest monk, so I went to Sri Lanka. But to my surprise, a lot of the places and monks don't practice the true teaching of Buddha. For example, some rely on astrology for ordaining, and others say you don't care about suttas nor Abhidhamma teaching, while others say that we should live in sensual pleasure, while the Buddha says all of these are wrong views. Thinking about this, I'm filled with nibbida and raga, but don't know what to do. Yeah, well, there are always going to be different degrees of understanding and of purity of conduct amongst bhikkhus. I mean, this goes right back to the Buddhist time. There were monks who were foolish and monks who misbehaved. But there are always monks who are following the right path. And actually, as long as the monks are, no matter how they deviate, as long as they're keeping the major precepts, then they're still worthy of respect. But you could, keep looking and find a tradition of monks that you can resonate with and that are teaching the Dhamma. As for rely on astrology for ordaining, that's a cultural thing. That's also I don't know exactly how it's done in Sri Lanka, but in Thailand, it's a tradition that whatever day of the week you were born on, your name has your bhikkhu name has to start with the same letter as the planet for that day. It doesn't really have too much. It doesn't have like a deep meaning. It's just a cultural form. Next, while doing metta meditation, should I constantly repeat the phrase or focus on the feeling? Do these two approaches give different results? My own feeling about that is that it's the feeling that's the important thing. The mental state of metta, and the phrases are just a skillful means of reaching that people just find. Uh, but I think the bottom line is you experiment and find out what works for you to bring up that genuine warm feeling of um, beneficial well-wishing that is metta. I'm having audio issues. I hope that it's recorded well enough. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the audio today. Uh, it got better after I quit and restarted my computer, but I don't think it's perfect. When a Sotapanna takes human rebirth, how different is he from a regular human being? Um, on a superficial level, not really different. You wouldn't. It's not like you would know no one passing in the street. But uh, if you observe someone over time and they keep flawless morality, they never, uh, they never do any grossly wrong deeds. You know, that that would be one of the marks of a Sotapanna. Also, an understanding that they have, which is internal. You can't really notice it, but they have an understanding of reality that's on a different level than the ordinary person. Cessation, as you explained, it sounds like absolute heaven, but I can't get there because I have so many involuntary desires and cravings in my body that are independent of intellect. Any advice? Oh, that's what meditation is for. And well, so the whole path is for, beginning with sila, beginning with precepts, um, keeping the precepts is is really for the purpose of training your mind. It works on the principle of fake it till you make it. That you keep the precepts, and that diminishes the impulse. Greedy or hateful impulses are diminished by keeping the precepts. Um, but then with the meditation, you increasingly train the mind and experience these deeper states that will lead to viraga nirodha. Um, a good exercise or practice that is highly recommended is to occasionally, for a period, even like for a weekend or something, just for some arbitrary period of time, keep the 8 precepts. That's a practice in sense restraint, which will diminish those desires and cravings. How can I ensure that I will encounter Dhamma in my next life? Will reading Buddhism every day help with that? Yes, it does. Learning Dhamma is a way of uh, accustoming the mind to that way of thinking, making it habitual, and then it'll tend to encourage that in your next life. You should also make an aspiration. May I encounter the Dhamma in my next life. You can make that aspiration, particularly when you perform meritorious deeds. When you do an act of kindness or generosity, you can make that aspiration. May the merit of this allow me to be reborn into a place and time where I can hear the Dhamma. Is the most effective way of practicing Nekkhamma via recognition of anatta? Is there a recommended way to practice anatta? I find myself getting hooked by various aspects of life. I think that I wouldn't say that anatta is something you practice. It's something you try and understand and realize. And Nekkhamma renunciation is a way of diminishing. I talked about keeping the 8 precepts. That's a practice of Nekkhamma. It's a way of diminishing the sense desires which tend to confuse the mind, and that would make seeing reality and seeing anatta easier. And we're talking with this series about the Nekkhamma Sutta about perception. Well, trying to perceive things in a way without a reference to self. When you are caught up in the idea of self, you see things through a kind of a filter of what's in it for me. I actually heard a theory put forward by a Buddhist teacher, speculative theory. So the whole is something that arose in evolution as a filter. That if you look at a reptile like a lizard, they'll sit still for a great deal of their time, and then they'll suddenly dart about when there's something takes their attention. And what's happening is they're not processing, according to this speculative theory, their mind is not filtering any of the data that's coming in through the senses, and they're overwhelmed with it. So they're kind of paralyzed a lot of the time until something really impinges. So for more effective operations in the world, the creatures needed to develop a filter to sort out all the sense impressions, and basically on the basis of what is this object related to me? Is it something desirable for me, like some food, or is it something dangerous for me, like a predator? Or can I safely ignore it? The filter basically works on that basis of what's in it for me. How does this affect me? And that creates an ego or a self in the mind. That's a central organizing principle. So I'm just throwing that out there as something to think about. What is pure form from Brahma realm? How is it different from ordinary form? Well, the idea is that the material some call fine metal story became, after death, he became reborn into the Brahma world, and he remembered his human life, and he felt great gratitude to the Buddha, and so he wanted to appear before the Buddha and offer thanks and praise. But when he descended to the earth plane and stood in front of the Buddha, he sank into the earth like the earth was made of water. And he was confused on what's happening. And the Buddha said, your 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 form is too subtle for this realm. You have to manifest a coarse body if you want to appear here. So this illustrates, I think, the way that the Brahma world, you could say, is on a maybe a higher vibratory plane or a different frequency. It exists as matter, but it's not heavy and coarse like the matter here. It's on a more subtle level, so it doesn't really interact with this matter unless it's some measures are taken. Does transfer of merit need to be set up mentally? In Japan, Zen, a lot of it has to do with the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century. There was a whole change of regime, and the samurai class became very powerful, and they and the government thought that the Zen monasteries were too powerful of an institution. Like, they wanted to break them, so they ordered actually the monks to marry. So that's why you have, to this day, you have married, and the married priests, as they call them in Japanese Zen. And this was the idea, to domesticate them. And also the violence comes in with the samurais wanted an ideological support for their warlike culture, more of a group to Rinzai Zen, which, rather than so-called the farmer Zen. And I've sometimes given this in talks as an illustration of the danger of imbalance between wisdom and compassion. That the samurais were taking the Buddhist theory and saying, when I chop off a man's head with my sword, all that's happening is empty atoms passing through empty atoms. There's no good nor no evil is done. It's just empty atoms passing through empty atoms. Which, on a technical sense, if you want to get nitpicky, that's true. It's just empty atoms passing through empty atoms. But it's a total lack of compassion, and complete corruption of the Buddhist teaching to use it in that way. So I think that became the Zen teaching was corrupted in that way, and which is a really beautiful teaching, actually, Zen, but it became corrupted by the samurai as using it selectively as a way of just know that monks. Oh, I'm sorry, this jumping around again. I know that monks cannot discuss attainment, but do monks discuss such things amongst themselves? Rarely. It's generally not considered good form to talk about. Next week, I will be at Plum Village in France for a family retreat. I hope to spend the week immersed in meditation, mindfulness, and contemplation along with my family. Any chance our river might offer something similar? Well, we have had people come. We're not really set up for group retreats, but we have had couples with children come and stay for a few days. That's something that we'll do selectively, mostly of people that we know. Mostly the way we're set up here is for individual retreat. can I still go fishing after I become a Buddhist if I don't do it for the sake of having fun and try and pay my best respect to the fish? Well, you are breaking a precept if you're fishing, but that doesn't do precepts. It's for stream entry. Well, you can approach the understanding of emptiness from one of two directions. One of them is the method of Abhidhamma, which is an analytical method. You keep looking, breaking things up into finer grain and not finding an essence or a self anywhere. The other approach is to use what I would say the method of dependent origination, to see the interrelationship of things, to see that nothing exists from its own side. Everything only exists as a reflection of other things, and you can't isolate any point as self-existent. But the true understanding of anatta only really occurs at stream entry. But you can approach it and make stream entry easier. You can approach it like a mathematical asymptote and get closer and closer to the realization, so that the leap over is less. Now, what is Nirodha Sampatti? Nirodha Sampatti is a particular meditative attainment, which is really I think, a simple explanation is that it's an immersion into Nibbana, which is only possible to be done by an Anagami or an Arahant. We'll stop there for this week. Sorry it was a bit glitchy today. I really don't know what to do about it. I keep trying slight tweaks on what I'm doing, and I don't know how much of the problem is this end and how much is the internet connection and how much is YouTube's interface. We'll just keep plugging along. I'll see you next week, and hopefully we have a decent connection.